But D.C. is now safe. The restaurants are booming. The place is booming. We have no crime. You can walk with your family down the middle of any street, go to a restaurant, you won't get in. They're opening new restaurants all over.
New this morning, a new Washingtonian investigation is shining a light on what many restaurant owners in D.C. say they can't say publicly.
Food editor Jessica Sidman reports that while the Trump administration claims the city's dining scene is, quote, booming, many restaurants are actually facing a Trump-era slump with fewer diners, scared staff, and new pressure from immigration crackdowns, federal layoffs, and security surges. Jessica is here with us now to break down what's really happening inside of D.C.'s restaurants and really what this means for the city. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, your reporting paints a very different picture from what the White House is saying, talking about a boomtown. This is a claim that they're making. What did the restaurant owners actually tell you about what is really happening behind the scenes?
Yeah, in fact, what the president said is the opposite of what is the reality on the ground. The fact is that this has been a very difficult year for DC restaurants, many comparing it even to the pandemic. And a big part of that does have to do with things that are, the effects of this administration.
I was in Georgetown the other day, and one of the restaurants I was at was saying, hey, the service is slow because people didn't come to work and they were dealing with some staffing issues. I'm curious, how have policies like the immigration crackdown and National Guard deployments affected everyday business for restaurateurs and some of their staff even?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure we all remember in August when the National Guard was first deployed. It really had this chilling effect on people going out in the city. One restaurateur who has a business downtown, for example, said that his business was down 30% in August compared to the previous year. And there's so many similar stories to that. And obviously the immigration crackdown has also been a huge component. It's no secret that the restaurant industry is run by immigrants. And, I think when we talk about this topic, we think about just undocumented workers. And there are some of those and some have been detained. But it's also, people who have legal status who are still afraid. And especially, back in August, when there was all this law enforcement activity, many calling in sick, afraid to go to work. One chef who I spoke to, who's a Mexican immigrant who has a work permit, not undocumented, telling me how he now takes an Uber to and from work because he's afraid of being tracked by ICE in his car or on the metro, and basically just goes to and from work and doesn't go out anywhere else.
So this is something else that is interesting. The restaurant owners are telling you that the MAGA supporters are spending freely while overall business has declined. How is this shaping the city's dining scene?
Right. Yeah. And on the flip side of that, you do have White House officials and more of the MAGA crowd going out in a bigger way than they did the last Trump administration. You may recall the first go around, there were a lot of these very high profile confrontations in dining rooms and restaurants. The most famous one where Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who's the press secretary at the time, got kicked out of a restaurant in Virginia. And so many Trump officials really congregated at the Trump Hotel. This time around, there is no Trump Hotel. And a lot of restaurant industry people have told me that this White House and its supporters are more out in a town, out on the town, that they are spending freely, that they're maybe not as discreet in public about their politics. So it's just a different vibe than it was before.
Okay, last time we spoke, we were talking about the Michelin Awards and Michelin stars, and I wanted to bring that up because we just had the Michelin Awards, and usually it's a bright spot for the industry, right? But DC actually saw a net loss in Michelin stars with the downgrade of the Inn at Little Washington. And so, in years like this, how are top tier restaurants kind of interpreting something like that? Does it kind of help counter the slump we're seeing? What are your just general thoughts on your take on that?
Yeah, it does in some ways feel like another blow to the dining scene. There were no new stars awarded to the DC area. The Inn lost its third. It was the only three-star restaurant in the DC region, and now it's down to two. Another Michelin star restaurant closed. So it doesn't feel great, I guess, for many of the dining scene. But also, it's hard to read too much into what Michelin does. They're very mysterious in many ways.
Boy, you said it. Sometimes it doesn't make a lot of sense, right? For
Yeah.
sure. All right, Jessica Sidman, food editor for Washingtonian magazine. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.